Bryson joins us now. He's in our virtual green room. His book is Socialism, Origins, Expansion, Decline, and the Attempted Revival in the United States. Phil, thanks for hopping on.
Happy to be here.
Let's talk about why you wrote this book. And I know you did a lot of research in putting this book together, and we're going to talk about that. But what motivated you to write it?
Well, in 1960, I was living at the age of 21 in Berlin, Germany. At that time, the East German regime, a communist regime under the Soviets and their occupation, decided to build a wall to keep their people from fleeing to the freedom, the markets, and the prosperity of the West. With so many people fleeing, they felt they had to keep them in. So they built the wall in Berlin, and I had a chance to talk to many people that were from the other side of the wall. I had the opportunity to then go home and study to learn why people would flee and why you had to build walls to keep your citizens at home. I studied economics, I studied Marxism, I studied international economics, and became a professor, and then spent 40-some-odd years doing research, writing about, visiting conferences, living in East Europe, and finding out what socialism really is up close. So that's the history of my life and career, and the reason why I wrote that book. Because in the United States, nobody was interested in socialism until we got the phenomenon of Senator Bernie Sanders, the millennials, who suddenly decided that socialism was the way we should be living. So I was concerned about that, and in retirement, I did for the first time in my life, some research to write to the general public rather than to other economists and scholars and scholarly journals. So that was the motivation for the book, which you just cited, and which took 4 years to produce.
What do you think people miss? I mean, let's go back to part 2 in your book. You talk about the establishment of Marxist-Leninist economic systems in the USSR at the time and the Eastern European countries. And what did you find, and what do you talk about there?
Well, I think the conclusions, the bottom lines are, and I was interested in a lot more than the bottom line in that research. I covered every aspect of Marxism, of central economic planning. The basic principles, values, policies, and programs of socialism include, first of all, income redistribution. That is, taxing the rich heavily and giving lots of subsidies to the poor. The second plank is state ownership of the means of production. That is, nationalization of all industries, with the state as the owner and manager of all business properties. And the third aspect of socialism is extensive regulations and micromanagement of the economy. Well, those second and third elements of controlling everything, of planning the whole economy, amount to an astounding overreach on the part of the state bureaucracy. Capitalism works because it's decentralized. Everyone has a plan. The consumers, the producers, the investors, the savers, everyone pursuing his own interest has a plan, and they work to meet their plan, and they work hard, and they learn how to coordinate. In centrally planned economies, that is, in the so-called Marxist-Leninist, the genuine socialist economies, there's only one plan, and that's the plan of the state to determine every price of every product in the economy, every product that will be produced, how it will be produced, where it will be produced, by what firm, who will produce it, and who will purchase it, to determine where the outputs of every state-owned firm will be shipped and sold, which firms will get more equipment and permission to employ more workers, and every other economic outcome is impossible to plan centrally with success. Red tape strangles the economy. Moreover, the incentive incompatibility in that system ruins incentives and strangles productivity and leads to an equality of poverty. There has been no socialist system which was really prosperous.
Do you think people miss that, thinking that, well, look, if everything was equal and if we could make it this way and then there could be some gains, this would work? But as you're saying, especially from the economics, because a lot of times it's not from the economic point of view. So you went back and you looked at numbers, you looked at the economies, and you went through that, right?
Yes, I looked at how the Soviet economy, the Soviet type economy, or the centrally planned economy works, and why it doesn't work. Now, socialists have some great goals. I mean, they want equality and they want an elimination of poverty, but the method of having the state take over everything, rather than having citizens incentivized, motivated, and working hard, that just leads to failure economically.
In the beginning of our conversation, you talked about Berlin. You talked about when the Berlin Wall was being built. You talked about conversations with people. What was that like?
It was really scary, especially for the West Germans. People see Berlin is situated in the middle of the former Soviet occupation zone. So people would come to Berlin and they would fly them to West Germany, to the British, French, or American occupation zones, and the Germans considered all Germans German citizens, whether you were in the Soviet zone or not. So when they'd fly them to the West, they would set them up with housing, with work, and a new start in life. And so people were leaving. A couple of million people left a country of about 17 million, was what they were then, in a couple of years. So they felt they had to stop that hemorrhaging of labor, and they built the wall. And people were afraid in West Berlin that the communists would simply come in and close everything down and take over West Berlin as well. So they were awfully afraid.
Oh, I bet. What do you hope the takeaway is for people who get your book, read your book, Socialism, Origins, Expansion, Decline, and the Attempted Revival in the United States? We're speaking with Phillip Bryson. You can get it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. What do you hope the takeaway is?
Well, the takeaway is that we see in socialist economies that the motivation is different. They see this inequality and the poverty of the working class as a matter for hatred and fighting and revolution and killing off the bourgeoisie. So socialists tend to be motivated not by a love for people, to help the people. Socialism in the United States has existed for a long time, but only in the private sector in the form of communes. Communitarian societies would bring their peoples to America from Europe, where they could have religious freedom. And then they'd get here and find them, some of them were ailing and old, so they would form a communitarian society to take care of them. They would work together, and the membership was voluntary, and it was motivated by love. But in the socialist societies, you have a socialist or communist party, you have the proletariat. Their job is to fight and take away from the capitalists, the bourgeoisie, all of their property, their ownership, their factories, and to take over the government. Under the dictatorship of the proletariat, they would then rule with a tight fist and a hard fist to put down any attempted counter-revolutions or rich people trying to get their property back. So it's a movement of hatred and retribution. And if you look at the people that are fanatically involved, sometimes you don't see a lot of love for the system or for the current regime, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So my thing is simply to warn people, choose wisely. Don't put people in office who are talking about we're going to get them, we're going to hate them, we're going to kill them. Choose people who are a little bit more moderate. And if you give away the freedoms that you have to a socialist system, and Bernie Sanders himself really is a Marxist-Leninist type socialist. And he talks about we're going to choose things. Corporations are not going to have the right to control everything. The people are going to control it. And the people are, of course, represented by the Communist Party or the Socialist Party, and by the government, by the dictatorship of the proletariat. And it's not a gentle system. And the It's not a productive system. So it's something that people should be aware of as they look at choices before they go to the ballot box.
I like the word moderation, absolutely. Phillip Bryson, Socialism, Origins, Expansion, Decline, and the Attempted Revival in the United States. Thanks.
My pleasure, Kate.